Good morning. I'm Glenn Lowry, Director of the Museum of Modern Art, and I want to welcome all of you here at the museum. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize some special guests today, and please hold your applause until I'm through with the acknowledgments. Tom Prendergast, who's just been introduced, Chairman of the MTA, Jean Shin, Second Avenue Subway artist, Sarah Zay, Second Avenue Subway artist, Barbara Lee Diamond Spielvogel, Chair of NISCA, and Rick Cotton, Special Counsel for Interagency Initiatives. Thank you all for being here. This morning, you will hear from Governor Cuomo, then we'll watch a short video, and then Tom Prendergast, Chairman of the MTA, will close the program and take questions. The governor will need to depart at the conclusion of his remarks because the Electoral College of the State of New York is convening in Albany at noon today, and we definitely want him to be there to cast his ballot. Thank you for being here. From Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh to The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali, many of the world's most famous and important works of art are right here in the Museum of Modern Art. But we as an institution exist in this extraordinary city full of artistic energy and vision, not just because of the works of art here at the museum or at other museums throughout the city, but because we are surrounded by some of the most incredibly interesting art and architecture anywhere in the world. From the Statue of Liberty to the magnificent bridges that crisscross our boroughs, to the sidewalk art that appears every day across this city, to the children who make art in schools, art and architecture make this city vibrant. And that's what defines New York as a creative and cultural hub. So we're thrilled and honored to have Governor Cuomo here today to talk about the new Second Avenue Subway, the first major expansion of the system in over 50 years. And we're delighted to give you all a first look at the art installations that will make this subway system come alive by some of today's leading artists installed in each of the 4 stations along the line. This will be like a small museum underground, redefining what it means to be in the subways here in New York. As every New Yorker knows, completing the Second Avenue Subway is an accomplishment in and of itself, and adding to that remarkable success is the integration of public art of this high caliber at each station. And I just had a moment to say to Tom Prendergast, wow, you are incredibly calm given what you have on your shoulders. It's an incredible feat, and we're thrilled that Governor Cuomo is leading projects to make New York a 21st century state and New York City a 21st century city. So, as Tappan Zee Bridge gets completed, as we look at a new LaGuardia and a new Penn Station, and at this grand and fabulous new Second Avenue Subway, let's give Governor Cuomo a huge round of applause. And now it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to Governor Cuomo.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. First to Glenn Lowry, thank you so much for having us here today, and thank you for preserving this great institution, which is the cathedral to modern art and a true asset to the state of New York. Let's give Glenn and MoMA a round of applause. Glenn did the acknowledgments, but there are some really special people here. First, starting with Tom Prendergast, who seems calm. Exhaustion will do that for you, you know? And I think that's where we are, but the MTA has so many responsibilities, just day in and day out, running the system, et cetera. And then when you put on top of that all the additional development work, and we have a very ambitious development plan, it really is overwhelming. And Tom has done a fantastic job. And let's give him a round of applause, please. And you'll hear from Tom in a few minutes. As you heard from Glenn, I'm going up to Albany to cast my ballot as an elector. I don't know that it will do much good at this point, but hope springs eternal. And that was not a political comment, Glenn. That was a philosophical comment. I don't want Momo to think I got political. But William Jefferson Clinton, former president, is also an elector who I served with, so I want to be there with him. And Tom will take whatever questions you have. We also have with us Barbara Lee Diamondstein, who is the chair of NISCA, which does great work, and Jean Shin and Sarah Z, who are two of the artists who actually, you'll see their work, and it is magnificent. And let's give them a round of applause. We have Rick Cotton, who we call our Robert Moses, and Mimi Reisner, who organized today, and I want to thank them very much. And we have John Samuelson, who is the president of the union that works at the MTA, and they have been outstanding. So let's give them a round of applause. Just as a way of context, I worked in the federal government for 8 years. And I got out of New York, and I visited literally every state in the United States, many, many times. And it really was a great orientation because it made me appreciate New York even more, frankly, because New York truly is a unique and special state, he says as an arrogant New Yorker. But it is. And when you look at what made New York, New York, you know, why New York? Why haven't any of the other cities around this country, around this globe, developed the way New York did? It's because New York was driven by the ambition of New Yorkers. New York is a purely built environment. We started with a great natural harbor. We had natural characteristics that assisted us. But then it was us. It was our ambition, our drive, our boldness to build what was never built before. It was engineering marvel after engineering marvel. And we'd build one thing, and then we had to outdo ourselves and build bigger and build better. Literally, the formation, what made New York, New York. You don't even see in New York City because it wasn't New York City. And if it's not in New York City, sometimes we forget about it because we tend to be a little myopic downstate. What made New York, New York was the Erie Canal, which was probably one of the greatest engineering marvels ever. Remember, New York was competing against Washington, D.C., who was going to be the access to the West. And Thomas Jefferson and George Washington wanted Washington, D.C. to be the access road to the West, and they were building the C&O Canal. And Governor DeWitt Clinton of New York, no relation to William Clinton, said, no, that's going to be New York. That is the way to the West. And they said to Governor Clinton, well, how do you get to the West from New York? He said, oh, very simple. You come in the harbor of New York with the ship, New York City. You go up the Hudson River. You get to Albany, and you make a right turn. And you go to all across the state, and you come out in Buffalo. And then you're in the Great Lakes, and from the Great Lakes, you can go anywhere. And they said, Governor, one question. When you make the turn at Albany, how do you get out at Buffalo with the ship? Because it's all land, 500 miles. And he said, oh, no problem. We're going to build a canal. And they built the Erie Canal, 1817, from 1817 to 1824. They built it on time. They built it on budget. And that's what brought all the goods in New York. That's how it started. And then tallest building after tallest building, longest bridge after longest bridge, hundreds of miles of subway, Long Island Railroad to bring people in from Long Island. That's New York. It is the built environment. And we were aggressive about it, and we were the international leader in it. And in those public works, we infused public art. Why? Because when we were doing the public works, it wasn't just about the function. It was about an expression of who we were and what we believe, and it was an impression and a gesture communicating the character of our society. So every public works was also an artwork. was also an educational experience. And a child that never walked into a museum or never walked into an art gallery, if they just walked around the streets of New York, they would be exposed to art and education and culture just by being a New Yorker. And that's where New York came from and what made New York special. I was growing up in Queens, and in Queens what we had was the Unisphere. That's what we had in Queens. World's Fair, they built the Unisphere, World's Fair left, but the Unisphere stayed. And as a young boy from Queens, that was special. I remember asking my father, Unisphere, what does that mean? And he said what he always said, look it up. Uni, sphere, unicycle, uniform, look it up. And then I'd go back, those days there were dictionaries, actually books with many, many pages that you would have to go through. And I'd find it and talk to him about what it meant, and then he would say, what's the derivation? And back into the dictionary. But the Unisphere, and it captured my imagination. It defined Queens. When you'd be speaking to someone from another borough and they'd say, where is that? I'd say, you know, when you're driving, you see the big globe, the Unisphere. I live right next to the Unisphere. And the concept of one world, one universe, even as a young boy, it captured me. And that was all across the city. There were lessons that we were imparting. There was an appreciation of art and history that we were imparting. And it was almost infused silently throughout society. From Lady Justice, the statue of Mercury at a transportation facility, the way we built government buildings. We didn't build cinder block buildings. It wasn't all about functionality and form. We built adorned buildings because we were saying this is government and we respect government. And we're proud of the government that we have. Central Park, we revere nature. And we're proud of nature, so much so that in the middle of this great metropolis, we will carve out an area and we will preserve it just for green space. Before anyone ever talked about green or the environment, in the middle of New York City, we're going to have a park. And the park is going to have magnificent carvings saying, we revere, we respect nature. We respect our founding fathers, and we have heroes in our society, and we have role models. We respect the men and women who made this nation free, and we respect those people in the armed services. State Capitol, 30 years to build. Not because they were slow. I don't think they wanted to finish. It was the magnificent public works in the country. Literally the most expensive public building built in the United States of America was the Capitol in Albany. They brought hundreds of stone carvers from Europe to build the state capitol, to say, this is New York State, the Empire State they called themselves. The best. Grand Central Terminal, Ceiling of Stars, Jones Beach, all of Jones Beach, Robert Moses, that is all built on fill. 7 feet of fill because there was no Jones Beach. They literally created the peninsula first and then built on top of the peninsula a great monument. Rockefeller Center, Prometheus, Marine Air Terminal at LaGuardia. Somewhere along the way, about the time at the end of Robert Moses and Governor Rockefeller, the program and ambition of building stopped in the state. And there are a number of reasons for it. But Governor Rockefeller was probably the last great builder. He built the Empire State Plaza in Albany that has the Corning Tower. Governor Rockefeller also built the World Trade Centers. If you look at the architecture of the 2 Corning Towers in Albany, it's almost reminiscent of the World Trade Centers. He had that 60s modern, brutalistic form of architecture. A lot of poor concrete. He built the state university systems all across upstate with much of the same architecture. But that was basically the end of the great building period. And it's time for New York State to re-enter that era and re-enter it in a big way. Why? Because either you are growing or your competitors are growing. When I was HUD secretary, I would fly into a city and I would count the number of cranes that were operating, because either that city is growing and renewing or their competitor city is growing and renewing. And when you look at New York, we have competition all across the globe. When was the last time we built and we renewed? When was the last time we really took a positive step forward to say, we're New York, we're preeminent, and we're going to keep it that way by building? Last big project, Verrazano Bridge, was 1959. Our airports, 1939, 1937, LaGuardia and JFK. We lost that ambition somewhere along the way, and it's time we recapture it, and it's time we recapture it with that sense of art that was infused in the original history of public works. Because art is New York. It's part of our economy, it's part of our identity, it's part of our culture, and we should celebrate that in public works the way we have. Now you feel it's starting to come back. Hudson River Park is a magnificent public work that has really brought public art to a great point. It was started by Mayor Dinkins and actually a relative who happened to have been the husband of my mother for many years. But it was a great public works right along the Hudson, and it had beautiful art as part of it. The High Line, which is really an extraordinary development, part community, part private, part public, but it gave you a sense of that public art again. And then the 9/11 Memorial, which really said to us in a graphic, painful way, dig deep and make a statement of who you are and how you feel as a society. And it's the first time we had made that statement in a long time, and that was the memorial. We have now commenced the largest single commitment to development and construction with a $100 billion construction program. It's rebuilding airports, terminals, infrastructure, state parks. We're doing historic renovations all across the state. We're going to build a new airport at LaGuardia, finally. Should have been built a long time ago. The Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, who tends to be a little candid and frank, and maybe a little more candid and frank than he should be to be politic. But he had a statement at one time where he said, if you were blindfolded and you landed at LaGuardia and they took off the blindfold, you would think you were in a third world nation. And all the New York politicians protested and scorned him and demanded an apology. And I said, he's right. Not the most politic thing to say, could have said it nicely, could have said it privately, but he's right. LaGuardia Airport, you land in that airport, how do you say, this is New York? It's almost like we've been desensitized to the point where no one even said anything anymore. It was the king's clothes. Nobody walked out and said, wow, that was a really horrible experience. Can you believe that is a New York airport? We're building a new LaGuardia airport. Penn Station is the same thing. That Penn Station has been allowed to be one of the largest train stations in the hemisphere, and has gone on as long as it has, is inexcusable. We're redeveloping the Farley Center finally, which is in the Federal Post Office across the street from Penn Station and Penn Station. There's a great sense of history there, and all the original architecture on that skylight, which is amazing, is going to be renewed. In the Long Island Railroad Concourse, we have video art displays all along the ceiling, all along the walls, that can project literally anything. State-of-the-art screens that just lighten the entire space, so you don't feel like you're walking through the catacombs in Penn Station. It actually brings light. The new Tappan Zee Bridge, which is the first new bridge built since the Verrazano Bridge in 1959. It was on the cover of President Obama's budget presentation as the most aggressive infrastructure program in the nation at the time. That goes across the Hudson River, and it is going to be magnificent. It's under construction. It's on time. It's on budget. And we pray every night that it stays that way. We are also starting a program that I'm very excited about. Other cities, other countries have begun lighting their bridges with LED color lights. And this has gone remarkably well. It's been an economic generator for places. San Francisco, people come just to see the color of the bridges. Boston has done it. Now, New York has the most beautiful collection of bridges in the most dense, concentrated area, probably on the globe. And we are going to bring that lighting, that LED capacity to our bridges. So now you have to imagine what our bridges can look like with almost a full palette of colors. You can blend it, and all the bridges will be lit, and they can be choreographed. So you can choreograph the bridges to a piece of music. You can synchronize them. You can have them in sequence. So it really is exciting. We call it the Harbor of Lights project. It will be the George Washington. It will be the Verrazano. And when you think about it from an aerial aspect, you will see all of New York really illuminated with beautiful colors. And I think it's going to be a very, very exciting spectacle. And the lights also save on the electric bill, which has an attraction to me also, frankly. We're redeveloping the Javits Center, adding 1 million square feet to make it competitive once again. And we're going to be consistent with that glass architecture that has really illuminated the West Side. We'll be redeveloping JFK. We reopened the TWA Terminal Hotel, which is a magnificent architectural building from the 60s and really reflects the jet age. We're doing this not just in New York City, but all across the state. We're building a new airport in Rochester, which has the same architectural sensitivity and sense of design and sense of art. New York State Fairgrounds, which are in Syracuse. We've restored the fairgrounds to the original decor. Buffalo grain silos. These are actually tall cement silos that held grain in Buffalo on the waterfront for ships to come and take the grain. They now, just with lights, are a magnificent light show every evening in Buffalo. In Buffalo, this is very famous. This is the Shark Girl. She's not my favorite, but she attracts, well, she actually reminds me of a woman I knew, but that's a different story. But this is a great attraction in Buffalo at Canal Side. Everyone has a picture with Shark Girl. And I have the real-life Shark Girl picture. So we're restoring a beautiful carousel that has a great story of a family that kept this because their father had built it, and we're going to restore it and put it back in Buffalo. We're redoing Jones Beach, which was really a masterpiece by Robert Moses. We're starting a new project called the New York Crossings. The MTA is removing all the toll booths to speed traffic and putting up electronic devices that read license plates and easy passes. So they call it open road tolling. You keep driving and the electronic cameras will take a picture of the easy pass and the license plate. This then puts up a lot of electronic equipment. We have an artwork that will cover the electronic equipment and look like waves and give you the sense of water and a fluid motion as you're approaching the tunnels and the bridges, which will add an element of art to what is now a very austere opening. And that will be the tunnels, the bridges, all in the New York City area. We're starting that, and we're excited about that also. The inside of the tunnels are being all redone, and even the inside of the tunnels will have a sense of design and art that hasn't been there before. We're redoing 33 subway stations, again, all using the opportunity to be an art display and an underground museum. On that theory of if a child never walks into a museum but just goes through their daily course of conduct, they will be exposed to art, and it will prompt their imagination. We're doing restorations, which we've done at the state capitol. They call that the $1 Million Staircase. Albany sounds far away for you in New York City. It's really not that far, 150 miles. It's a beautiful ride up the Hudson, and it is worth it just to see the state capitol, which is truly magnificent. This is what they call the War Room. This is Proctor's Theater, which is in Schenectady outside of Albany. All of upstate had a rich manufacturing history and was very prosperous for a long time and built beautiful institutions to celebrate the arts, and we're restoring many of them. Hotel Syracuse, Olana, which is just a temple of artistic design and is a special place, even better now after the restoration. And today and this week will be the 2nd Avenue Subway, which is New York's newest public art display. The architecture of these new stations is special, starting with the canopies. This is a glass canopy that is the entranceway down to the subway station. The subway stations themselves will give you a sense of space that you never felt before in a subway station, that claustrophobia that descended upon you when you walked into a subway station is gone. You have large domed ceilings. You have a mezzanine level that is very spacious, very airy. I think it will encourage a different type of human behavior. You're not concentrated. You don't have that same density, and you don't have that same level of intensity. And it really is a magnificent engineering feat. You have also what's called columnless design. There are no columns. There are none of those subway columns, those steel girders that are all around holding up the roof. So that gives it a feeling of openness and space. And it has the largest commitment to public art in 50 years. And it is worth seeing just for the art. Why you would chuckle at this slide, I have no idea. It is somewhat incredible, I admit, but the deadline to open the 2nd Avenue Subway was January 1st, this coming January 1st. And the chuckle, frankly, tells it all. Now, in defense of the deadline, the deadline was set in 2009. So it was set a long time ago in 2009. They said January 2017. 2009, since 2009, a lot has happened. The machinery that was digging the tunnels was, the amount of time the machinery could operate was reduced because the neighbors felt too much vibration, too much noise, so we reduced literally the construction schedule, et cetera. Despite all the reductions, despite the alterations in the schedule, we're still going to make the same deadline. Why? Because I think that is a very important element to what we're doing. When you look back at what we've been talking about and you look back at the success, there was an inherent belief in government. There was an inherent belief in the capacity and competence of government. And all that adornment, the statues, we were celebrating what we could do. It was our achievement. You know, we now talk about government like it's some foreign entity. Well, the government is us. It's nothing else. It's just a vehicle for collective actions. That's all the government is. You damn the government, you damn us. And the inverse is also true. We believed we could do anything. And that's what made New York, New York, and we did. We'll build the longest bridge, and then the next bridge will be longer, the tallest building, and the next building will be taller. Well, I don't know if we can. Of course we can. We're New York. We have a swagger, we have an arrogance. It's true. And it made New York, New York. And we can get it done on time. And the cynicism and the skepticism, although deserved, we have to disprove that. We have to disprove that. We have to get the people of this state to the point where they believe again in their capacity and their competence. So that when we say, we're going to build new airports, we're going to build new train stations, we're going to build a new Penn Station, they say, I believe you can. And we're restoring the credibility. Now, they still chuckle. We said, we're going to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. They said, impossible, you can't. They talked about it for 20 years. We said, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it on time, and we're going to do it on budget. And part of it is not just building a bridge, but restoring the confidence that we can. And we are. The 2nd Avenue subway is going to open on time, despite all the adjustments that actually slowed down the time, and a delay would be more than justified given the slowdown. We're going to open on January 1, because deadlines matter. And not only are we going to open on January 1, but it is going to be an accomplishment and a proud accomplishment for every New Yorker, for the design, for the architecture, for the competence that made it possible, and for the art that you see throughout it. You're going to see a short video on the art itself. On the 2nd Avenue subway, Tom Prendergast will then answer any questions that you have. We're going to start with a New Year's Eve party to celebrate and have a ceremonial ride on New Year's Eve. If you're interested in attending that, let us know. I know Congressman Charles Rangel is going to be there because he's buying the first round of champagne for all of you who show up. That's the kind of congressman he is. This really is just the beginning, I believe, of a new period of enlightened birth. We know what we need to do. We know what made us great. Now we just need to do it, and we know that we can. Thank you for having me, and you'll hear from Tom Prendergast.